Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit HFY called Glintstone Chapter 15 Trapped, written by some guy named Ted. The link to the original will be down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. And if you do, please consider subscribing, else you might find a Glintstone hiding in your fridge to have a little talk with you. Those bastards messed with her engines. She can't take off until we fix her, Clint said, looking at me. It looks like they've got us trapped. What are we going to do? I asked. He scoffed at me. We're going to fix Susan, kill any bastard who tries to kill us, and get out of here. He rose to his feet and seated position and waved at me with his hand. I'll need your help. Getting into Susan's inside requires 2 hands. I rose as well, picking up my rifle as I walked by. Clint opened up the bay ramp and we walked out cautiously, heads on a swivel. The hospital hangar was empty of all but 4 dead Gurks on the floor. Clint had grabbed his tool chest on the way out of the bay and he set it on the ground, next to the near-invisible panel that protected the machines that helped Susan run. He motioned me over and I stood next to him, head still moving, watching every door. Do you see that little indents there in the top corners? He asked me. I nodded. I need you to use this. He waved a tool at my face and loosened them. They're in there pretty tight, so you'll need to use both hands. I nodded, setting my rifle down on the ground. I grabbed the tool and placed the flat edge into the indent. I heaved, expecting heavy resistance, as Clint was one who had put these in there, and it was likely going to require a great deal of strength. It tumbled off with barely a whisper, and the panel fell off. I jumped back, narrowly avoiding getting my toes smashed to a pulp. What the hell? Clint shouted. I looked around nervously, hoping that none of the bounty hunters had heard that. Unlikely, but it never hurt to wish for something. Those bastards violated my sweet baby. They are going to pay. He seemed much more upset about the fact that someone messed with Susan than the fact that they were trying to kill us for something that he had done over a year ago. I made a mental note to never touch Susan without Clint's consent in the future. That is, if we got out of here alive. Clint pushed the fallen panel out of the way with his foot and stepped closer to the exposed machinery, peering closely at it. I couldn't see anything in the tangle of wires, metal tubes, blocks of blinking lights and gears, but Clint clearly did. They took the power binders. She can't start without them, he said, rubbing his chin with his hand. I don't have any more, and I had to make those custom for Susan. He looked at me. The only way we're getting out of here is with those power binders. We have to find them. As if the gods had a sense of humor, a loudspeaker cackled on. A hissing Gurk spoke on the other end. Glintstone, we know you're still on the station. Your only chance of getting off is if you come to the 3rd floor dining hall to get your power binders. This we know, but we also know that you're rather good with tech and could make another set. Or perhaps you could if you still had both hands. The voice chuckled, in so much as a lizard could chuckle. It was a hideous sound. We think that you will come to us as added incentive. We have several dozen doctors here who will die in increasingly painful ways until you show yourself. You have 20 minutes. The voice cut off. Clint looked at me and I looked at him. It was clear what we were going to do. We turned in one motion and marched back up the ramp to the hidden panel covering Clint's rainy day arsenal. We reached out and touched the concealed switch, which caused the panel to rise and reveal a small army's worth of weapons. Clint reached down and pulled out a pair of white full-body suits. I grabbed mine and slipped it on, the fabric deceptively smooth and soft. It looked like it belonged to someone's comfortable clothes closet, but it could stop close-range plasma bolts. I saw Clint struggling with his and reached out to help him. He half turned away, his mouth partially open, starting to say that he could do it on his own, but he saw the situation as it was and allowed me to help him. I finished and he tugged the rest of his clothes on. The dark pants, the dark brown boots, the red shirt, and the long coat. The left sleeve gave him some trouble, as the last half foot hanging loose over the stump. He tried laboriously to roll it back up, but it wouldn't stay. I reached out and took the folded it back, putting it in place. Clint nodded in thanks. I held his glove as he slipped on the remaining hand into it. Clint reached down into the arsenal and pulled out a gun belt, hung with a pair of vicious-looking pistols. He handed it to me and I buckled it on, the guns pulling at my waist. Several knives followed the guns and pushed into my belt. A month ago, they had all felt strange and out of place. Now they felt almost natural. A month of training under Clint Stone was worth dozens under his self-proclaimed masters. Clint had pulled out his own gun belt and was struggling to strap it on. I reached out and closed it for him. His mouth grew thin in frustration, but he allowed me to buckle it. His face said that if this had not been in a situation where lives were at stake, he would have done it on his own, no matter how long it would have taken. If we survived this, Clint Stone would learn to do everything with one hand that he used to do with two, and he would do it better, just to spite himself. Clint reached down into the arsenal one last time and pulled out his white-brimmed hat, setting it on his head. He pulled a pistol out of his belt and looked at me. I pulled out both of mine, the long barrels modified to have a shot like a rifle, glinting in the light. "Here we go," he said as he strode down the ramp. I walked at his side, my pistols at the ready to shoot anything that moved. Clint strode across the hangar with a calm, assured stride that told me that he was ready to tear apart anything in his way. We marched down the hall, heading for the dining hall. We went to get back the parts of our ship so that we could get out of here. We went to free the innocents from the captors, but mostly we went because bounty hunters had dared presume that they could kill us. They had dared to presume that Clint Stone and TEDx Jakku would be an easy target, that we would roll over and die. They were dead wrong. The hallways resounded with the sound of our feet hitting the metal floor, the metal walls causing the noise to bounce back and forth, echoing through the whole of the section. I saw a flicker of movement in one of the doors ahead and raised my pistol. When the Gurk lifted its head for the line of sight, the last thing he saw was my shot entering his eye. Clint took one out while he was hiding in one of the other side halls. We strode past the smoking corpses, barely seeing them. Double doors sat down the hallway, providing an excellent place to lie in wait. Clint and I aimed our pistols and filled the doors with plasma, toning them red hot. A shriek of pain sounded out from behind the doors. We approached the doors and Clint lifted his boot, smashing them in. The weakened hinges gave way before the enormous blow and then toppled, crushing the Gurk behind it. The scent of burning flesh filled the air, the sound of screams. They were silenced when I jumped on the doors. The hallway ahead was full of a dozen Gurks, all armed to the teeth. But they were surprised that we had made it this far, and that we had just killed 3 of their number with no more trouble than swatting an insect. Clint and I were not surprised. We lifted our pistols and filled the air with plasma. It tore into the Gurks with a vengeance. They dropped left and right, chests and heads smoking. The few who had reacted quick enough to survive the initial barrage aimed their weapons at us, but their aim was wild and undisciplined, and not a single shot came near us. Clint and I made short work of them. Despite having only one arm, and therefore only one gun, Clint still killed more of the Gurks than I did, dropping them all with precise, careful shots that left no survivors. And the dining hall was just ahead, and Clint and I marched relentlessly onwards. We burst through the doors and saw that perhaps half a dozen of the Gurks remained. They stared at us, shock written across their faces. Clearly, they never expected us to make it past the doors. We stood, pistols pointed at their heads. They stood, their pistols pointed at our heads. A group of huddling doctors sat on the ground, pressing against the wall. It was at this time that my body remembered that it was half dead from exhaustion, and my legs gave way. I lay on the floor, heart racing, gasping for breath. That seemed to be the signal for the plasma fire erupting in the room. I saw 3 shots strike Clint in the chest, but he didn't waver. The suit did its job. But Clint's red shirt now had 3 holes burned through it. The Gurks stared in shock, and Clint took advantage of their surprise, unleashing a storm of scorching fire. 2 of the Gurks dropped burning holes in their chests. From my position on the ground, I tried to aim my pistol, but my arms were too weak to move. My body seemed to be using all its energy it had to keep my heart running. After several more shots did nothing to Clint, the Gurks realized that the guns would do nothing and closed on Clint. Knives flashing. He shot one more through the heart and then dropped his pistol, grabbing one of the knives from his belt when the Gurks got within arm's length. His arm lashed out, his knife cutting the air as it sought the throat of the nearest Gurk. It found it, and the blood pushed out of the wound, showering Clint. The other two Gurks circled around him, one to the left and one to the right. I watched helplessly from the ground, fighting to control my racing heart. The one on the right lunged at Clint, and a moment later so did the one on the left. Clint raised his arms to stop them. Had he still possessed two hands, they would have been stopped in their tracks, struggling for breath as Clint squeezed the life out of them. Had he still possessed two hands, they would have been dead, and we would be on our way out of here. But Clint only had his right hand, and his left was gone because of me. His right hand closed on the Gurk's throat and began to squeeze, but his left arm, ending just past the elbow, did nothing to stop the charging lizard. Clint's stump hit him in the center of the chest, stopping him just sort of bowling Clint over. The Gurk's knife kept going, seeking Clint's throat. Clint realized his mistake almost too late and dove forward, avoiding the knife by inches. He pulled the Gurk that he had by the throat along with him, and they landed in a heap, each struggling to get advantage over the other. Despite his handicap, the advantage lay with Clint. He was bigger, stronger, faster, meaner. As I watched, Clint swept his short arm across the Gurk's chest, pinning him. Clint rolled on top of him and swung his fist down with a fury. The first blow caved in the reptile's skull. The last Gurk crept behind Clint, hoping to catch him unawares. He didn't. It was over quickly. Clint spun around, propelling himself forward from the ground with his powerful legs. His right hand grabbed the knife from his waist and plunged it deep into the Gurk's stomach before he could react. Clint stepped out of the way as the last bounty fell to the ground. I finally stilled my racing heart and stood, my limbs shaking. One of the doctors at huddled group stood up and walked over. It was the same doctor as before, the Scythian. He gripped my head in his hands and looked into my eyes. He seemed to find nothing wrong, because he said, "You'll be fine, just a little rest and no more fighting." He gave me a stern look. "I've pulled you back from the brink before, and I have no desire to do it again." I nodded. The doctor turned to Clint, who was rifling through the Gurk's pocket, one by one looking for the power binders. He seemed to have found them because he straightened up and put his hand in his pocket. The doctor walked up to him and gave Clint the same looking over as he did to me. "You're much stronger than you look, Clintstone. Perhaps strong enough," the doctor said musingly. "Strong enough for what?" Clint asked, the tone that said he was in no mood for games. "When I first saw your injury," the doctor nodded at Clint's arm, "I thought that you had lost your hand for good. When I saw how fast it healed, I thought to myself, maybe it could work. When I saw you fighting today, a mere day since you were on your deathbed, I knew that you would be strong enough." The doctor paused and drew breath. Clint leaned forward, a dangerous glint in his eyes that said if the doctor did not explain what he was talking about, there would be trouble. The doctor continued talking as if nothing had happened. "There is a place that may be able to give you back your arm." Clint drew a sharp breath, his eyes wide. "There is a planet somewhere, floating out in the deep, dark abyss, called Skavolka. The beings that inhabit it are living beings that are not made of flesh. They are born of flesh and bone, but they change over their lives into beings made of metal. They build metal limbs and bones and organs and fuse them to the fresh bodies, their mortal bodies. They encase themselves in living metal. I think that you are strong enough to survive the violent measures that they use to graft the metal to flesh." Clint seemed taken back, but his eyes shined with hope. "Where can I find this planet, this Skavolka?" "I do not know for sure," the doctor said, "but I do know that you can find the answer. On Labramar, the great library there holds answers to a great many questions." "Labramar? That's in the very heart of the Swarm Empire. I can't go there, I'm a hunted man." The doctor shrugged. "If you want to find Skavolka, you'll have to go there. I wish you luck." He turned to leave, but I grabbed his arm. "I must thank you for saving our lives. What is your name, that we may visit if we are ever in the neighborhood?" I said, shaking the doctor's hand. "I'm called McGee, but you can call me Bones," said the doctor. "You saved my life as well." He nodded at the dead Gurks. "I must thank you for that. If you will excuse me, I have a patient to attend to." He turned and walked away. I stared after him until Clint tapped me on the shoulder. "Let's go," he said. "We've got a planet to find." He sounded excited, and I could hardly blame him. He had just found out that he would no longer have to live with a crippling injury. I felt relieved as well. Hopefully, when Clint was healed, it would ease the guilt that I felt for maiming him. We strode down the hallway back the way we came when a thought came to my mind. How had Bones known Clint's last name? I turned around looking for him, but he had already disappeared around a corner. End of chapter. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. If you wish to support the author, there is a link to the original story, so pop over there and give him your support. If you wish to support this channel, however, there are a few ways to do so. The best and easiest would be to share this video with other people, as well as liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. All of these things tell the algorithm that this channel is at least vaguely interesting, and that may share it with other people. If you wish to support the channel in some other manner, watching my other videos would also help tremendously. Or, if you really like, there is a link down below to leave a tip, or to join the Patreon. Any and all support is very much appreciated. And I hope that you all have a good one until the next time, and I'll see you then. Cheers.